Hello friend, John Dalton here for the Emergence podcast, where we look into consciousness, the mystery and love. So I had a question come in, I think it was through Instagram. Somebody says, "Hiya John, is reality separate from our minds? Or is reality created by our minds? We can choose to see the world, people, events, etc. as good. We can see the world, etc. as bad. So is reality really just a mind creation? If we choose to see it as a positive place, are we living in denial, a fantasy? Or is there one true reality? And if yes, should we be endeavouring to see the world as it is in all its beauty and suffering, even if it turns out to make us feel pretty bad, insecure at times, etc.? I ask this question as you've mentioned before, that when you see the world as a scary place, it's not a nice way to live. So you choose to see the world as a good place, a good and positive place. The whole reality thing is mind-bending. I just thought I'd ask your perspective. Thank you in advance." This is a great question, but it's a big question. Is reality real? Am I delusional? Is there a real reality? And am I out of step with it? Very important questions, and can lead you into difficult territory, because it's very easy to sort of feel like you're losing your mind. And in a way you are a little bit, because that's a question. It's like pulling on a little thread, and you very quickly you start to unravel the whole tapestry of existence. And for me, I began to see a lot of assumptions that I hadn't really thought about, because there's conditioning of the sort of conditioning that we're all familiar with: religious conditioning, financial conditioning, political conditioning, all that kind of thing. But this kind of conditioning was much more basic, much more wasn't even said, it was just assumed. And it required me to start to pull it apart and to test all the assumptions. And the kind of barometer for testing all the assumptions is my direct experience. So I encourage you to check everything in your own experience. What's my actual experience as against what have I been told is my experience? And it's easy to sort of feel like you're ridiculous when you start to ask these questions. And I really encourage you to read The Gentle Snap, because The Gentle Snap is all about pulling apart all these assumptions that no one ever told me, but once you come into your direct experience and you start to look at everything through the lens of your own direct experience of what is my experience as against what I've been told, then you begin to see things that you perhaps didn't see before. So, for example, I've never seen my face. You've never seen your face. I can see your face and you can see my face, and that's all in existence, but I've never seen my face the way I see other people's faces. I can see a reflection in a mirror or in water, and when I move, it moves in sync, but I've never seen my face the way I see other people's faces. And you could say, well, so what? And it's like, well, that's just one little thing that begins to kind of go, well, that's interesting. Why is that? Why have I not? I don't know for definite that I have a face the way other people have a face. I have a field of vision that I register the world in. It's not two little eye holes that I like looking through binoculars. It's a big circular field of vision that I am just present in. And you can begin to do something very similar with lots of other parts of existence where you can begin to see through it. So, Gentle Snap. Go and read The Gentle Snap for that. So let's say you read The Gentle Snap and you arrive at the same place I have arrived, which is it's not as real as I thought it was. Then you're into, well, why do I keep showing up here? What am I doing here? What's the point? And what is this thing? Because once you start to kind of go, this isn't as real as I thought it was, then you kind of go, well, I'm not really sure of anything in this. And then you're into, well, I'm told in the same way as I've been told about all the other things, like my face and all the other things to do with existence. Again, you're not told this explicitly. It's not like your mom sat you down one day and said, or your dad sat you down one day and said, yes, you have a face. It's just, you just assume it, like a lot of other things. So in the same way, we're told we are in a reality with everybody else. Whereas we have no experience of that, no direct experience of that. I never wake up and look out of somebody else's eyes and go, oh yeah, it's the same. It's like, living in a row of terraced houses, and you want to see what it's like in the neighbor's house. You go down and, you look in their house and you go, oh, okay, yeah, it's very similar to mine. The decoration is slightly different, but yeah, it's to all intents and purposes, it's the same. I've never done that with somebody else's body. I've never opened my eyes and looked out of anybody else's body. It's always been from my perspective, the whole thing. And I don't know for definite, but I'm guessing it's the same for you. And in the same way as questioning everything, I go, that's interesting. Why is it like that? Why is my whole experience just from my perspective? That's significant. And then again, testing everything against my experience of, well, here I am driving along on a very misty day, but other than that, I mean, the mist is lovely. The nature I'm driving through is beautiful. I've got my two lovely dog friends behind me sleeping, and all is well. And then the rest is what I'm told, meaning I'm told there is a country called Antarctica. There, I'm told, I've never been there, but I'm told it was there. I've seen images of it. I don't doubt that it's there, but for me, it's a story. It's not my direct experience right now. And in communication with other people, they tell us what's going on for them. They tell us what their experience is. They tell us how something affected them, how they feel about things. And we either, it makes sense to us, or it resonates with something inside us, or it doesn't. So if somebody says, oh, the world is a terrible place, people are cruel and mean, and everybody is out to get you. And if that resonates, okay, you feel like that too, okay. But if it doesn't, then what's going on? Why do they see the world that way and you don't see the world that way at all? Because your experience is, yes, some people have been cruel and some people have been manipulative, but by and large, most people haven't, and most people have been okay, and most people are lovely in your experience. So what's going on? Why is it so different? Why are they having such a different experience to you? And then you're into the territory of, well, one of us is wrong here. One of us is not facing reality. And that's when the introduction of the third reality, as I think of it, is introduced. The idea that there is a real reality and one of us isn't facing it. And that's where, again, you have to claim authority for your life, which is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, because you're kind of on your own when you do that. You're kind of going, my reality is what counts for me. And you're kind of going, you have to go, I don't really believe there is a third reality. I don't doubt you when you say that the world is a terrible place. I think for you, your experience of your reality is that the world is a terrible place where everybody's out to get you. But that's not my experience. And if you are saying to me that I have to agree with you and that I'm denying reality, I'm denying the third reality, the real reality, then you're in conflict with me. Now, if I get into it with you and go, no, you're wrong, you're the one who's wrong here, the world is a lovely place and you're the one who's deluded, then I'm in conflict with you. Now, for me, I'm not in conflict with anybody, because whatever people tell me about their experience, it feels like a telephone call from Greenland, and the person is telling me about the weather in Greenland. And I don't feel it's my place, or I don't feel like I'm informed, or that I'm correct, or that I'm arrogant enough to go, you're wrong. The weather is not like that in Greenland, or Iceland, or wherever you're calling me from. The weather is lovely. Because from their experience is what it is. So for me, and again, you have to check this in your experience, but for me, it doesn't feel like I'm sharing the same experience as everybody else. What I feel like I'm sharing with people is communication. And the only way communication is going to work is if we agree. So I'm speaking English, and I'm assuming if you understand what I'm saying, that you can speak English as well. And really what that means is we have agreed that certain sounds mean certain things. Words I'm making, with the sounds I'm making with my mouth, are words, and we've agreed that the words mean something. That's all. But if you listen to a language that you don't understand, then all you're hearing is the sounds. And it's kind of the same with existence. That when I say, oh, see that lovely tree over there, that we agree that that energy, form, shape, whatever, is a tree. Because otherwise we'd spend the whole time redefining everything, every conversation that you ever had. And that's time consuming, and I don't think it's the point. I think that we're part of what we're doing here, sharing this time and space together, is about communication. So we have a kind of shorthand for existence. But when you start to get into, well, my shorthand should be this, instead of just going, oh, I think my experience of the world is a terrible place. People are awful, and we're all doomed. That's my experience of the world. When I go, that's the way the world actually is. There is an actual place, and it's actually like that, and you have to agree with me. Then, at least on one side, there is a conflict, because I'm going, well, that's not my experience, and I don't feel like that. That's not what's happening. But again, all this requires you to come into your authority of your own life, which, as I say, is not an easy thing to do, because it's very lonely. You know, when you believe in a third reality, there's a kind of comfort of the flock with you, you know. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I live near sheep. So I know I can see, you know, a lone sheep, they have to feel very safe to be on their own. And as soon as they're feeling not so safe, they like to get together. They like to bunch up together. And I think we're similar. That when the idea of a third reality, that there's a real reality, and if, you know, I'll just conform to that, I'll just fit in with that. That's very comforting to kind of go, I hear what you're saying, but that's not my experience. That's not my reality. That's not easy to do. But in my experience, in my spiritual life, that's what you end up doing. You end up having to do that. Because if you go to a guru and they tell you the way the world is, or they tell you the way the spirit is, or they tell you the way God is, eventually that's going to backfire on you. The wheels will fall off that. Whereas the most helpful thing anybody can say, and the most honest thing anybody can say about truth or God or love or anything like that is, this is my experience. This is what it feels like to me. You go and check it in your experience. You go and check it in how it is for you. And if it's that way, beautiful. And if not, then well, that's beautiful too. I'm not trying to tell you how things are. So once you get all that sort of in place, then you're into, well, what about all the terrible things that are going on in the world? And that's where it gets even more difficult, and requires more presence and coming into your direct experience. And checking in on the inside about what you're moved to do, because everything that's not in your direct experience is a story. Now, it could be there's a great party going on somewhere and I'm missing out on it, and that causes feelings to happen inside you. Equally, it could be there are terrible things going on, and though that can cause feelings as well. The feelings can be of distress and despair and sorrow and heartbreak and all sorts of things. But they're all stories until they're in your direct experience. So if you see a story about a terrible thing that's happening, everything is significant, everything is meaningful. Why that story and not another story? Why are you constantly being told these stories and not other stories? That's significant. And then to kind of check in with yourself and go, what am I moved to do here? Am I moved to go and do something about this terrible thing that I've heard about? Am I moved to actually go to the place and see if I can help? And that's a hard question to ask yourself, because it's very easy to get triggered by these terrible images and then just feel bad and go into the feeling of badness more and more and more without putting your feet to the fire and going, what am I going to do about it? What am I moved to do about it? Because we would all we all think about things, and then there's what we do, and they're often quite separate, and our mind can get involved in thinking and anguishing about things when it has zero intent to actually do anything. And that can be a hard thing to face, because you have a huge upswelling of heartbreak and sadness when you see the whatever terrible image that you see, and then to go, am I going to do anything about this? And to go, no, I am not going to do anything about this. I am not going to go to that country. I am not going to do whatever. And then you have to come back into, well, number one, you have to live with that, to live with the knowledge that you're not going to do anything about it. And different people are configured differently. What matters is how you're configured, and can you live with it? Can you live with what you do or what you don't do? I mean, it applies to everything, but particularly in having to really face a media that is trying to get you to feel something. And it's usually not to feel great. And that's not to diminish that terrible things are going on in the world. There are, of course, but to snap it into reality, you have to look at what are you moved to do. And if you're not moved to do anything, then you have to face that and then live with that. And be okay to know that you're going to live with it. And know that it was the right thing for you. And if you happen to, if it's happening in some other country, and somebody says, you meet somebody and they tell you, what they experienced, and they say, why didn't you do anything? You have to be up for answering that question. Why didn't you do anything? And whatever the answer is for you, that you can be okay with that. So once you get all that sorted out, then you have to come back to what is my direct experience now? Because it's very easy to allow a story to color what your direct experience is now. It's like being on having a lovely picnic, a lovely summer's day. It's a beautiful summer's day, and then you get a telephone call and you hear that someone very close to you has passed away, and then suddenly you're devastated and all your emotions are, and really all that's happened is you've just got new information. Your direct experience hasn't changed at all. It's still a lovely day, the sun is still shining, the picnic is still lovely, but you've just got new information and you've responded. A big cascade of responses happened inside you. And this is the kind of terrifying thing about living in the moment. It sounds lovely when people say it, oh, live in the moment, live in the now. That sounds great, but that means, like, taken to its conclusion, you get the phone call and you hear the news, and then you can come back to the lovely day. You can come back to the lovely picnic, the sunshine, it all. Now, maybe there are people who can do that, maybe not, I don't know. I don't think I could. I think I would be affected by that. But I can do a version of it with the news, because the news is trying to get you to feel bad, whether it's negative, depressed, powerless. It's under the banner of information, I need to know, but the end result is always that you just feel terrible. So it's fine to know, and I do know what's going on in the world, but there's an energetic field that we all share behind the scenes, and your contribution to that, my contribution to that, is significant. And if I add more fear, more feelings of powerlessness, more feelings of despair, of hopelessness into it, it's just going to add to an already pretty large field of that. Whereas if I come into my experience, which is it's a lovely day, the sun is shining, and I'm happy, I'm just happy, and I'm unapologetically happy, because we're all happy, and yet we all know that there are people who are not happy. There are things going on for people at the moment, and yet we are all happy. And I don't mean happy in an oblivious way. I don't mean happy in a denial of other people's experience, but in a way, in a knowledge of, this is my direct experience. I was quite happy before I heard the terrible news. I was quite enjoying the sunshine. That's my direct experience. That's what's happening. And that's what I'm going to focus on. And that's what I'm going to stay with. That's what's true for me now. Now, I keep checking that. That's not something I'm just going to set on default. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to feel whatever feelings I have when I see whatever I see on the news. My heart will break. I will let it break. I'll feel it. I'll feel all the feelings. But I'll come back to what's happening now. And then once you do that bit, then the next bit is the future. What about the future? Because you can look at what's happening the past, what's happening now, and you can imagine a future. And a lot of the news and the media is involved in that as well. It's encouraging you to think about the future in a certain way. And it's not great. The future you're encouraged to think about is not great. It's not really a future you would want. So then you come into, and this is what the person was asking about, was you only can really get to the future when you've squared away all this other stuff about, is reality real? Am I having the same experience? Or is there a third reality? If you think there is a third reality, this is not going to work for you. If you think you have a face, probably not going to work for you. So you can only really get to this if you are comfortable with the idea that there is no third reality. Because then you come into what shapes the future. And what you think about shapes the future. Now, lots of people say that. It's very big in the whole manifestation world. And I have found it to be true, but that's my experience. You have to find that for yourself. You have to arrive at that yourself. That knowledge that what I think about and how I view the future is what creates the future. And then the way you think about the future matters a lot, because it's not a case of I'm just going to idly think about the future and it doesn't really make any difference, it doesn't really matter. You start to realize it matters a lot how I think about it. And they're getting closer to proving a lot of this stuff on in quantum physics and that kind of thing. But if you see that what you think about matters, then you're much more careful about what you think about and how you think about the future. And as an aside, it makes you feel better, because everything is underpinned by the mystery. And the mystery, part of the mystery is a mystery. Like I don't know any of this stuff for definite. I know it in my own experience, but until I go through the death process, whatever that is, and even then I don't know if it's like I'm going to suddenly know everything, but I'm not there yet, and nobody is there yet, because it seems like you don't come back from that. And like near-death experiences are not death experiences, they're near-death experiences, which are a different thing. Useful, valuable, all that kind of thing, but they're not the same. So you don't know. I don't know. And that's what when I say, I think it's important to come back to I don't know, because it keeps you open. It keeps it a whiteboard and not written in stone. And it also stops you getting into conflict with people, because you're not trying to, this is the way it is. So thinking about a future that you want, expecting a future that you want, yes, it makes you feel better, but it also brings it into existence. Because if you let go of the idea of the third reality, then instead of you being one little person on a big planet, you become this being, this presence that looks into existence, a bit like a snow globe that you look into. And then your story, the story of your existence, is what happens in your little snow globe, and you can influence that. So if your story is to create world peace, then you can begin to think about that. It's not to say you're definitely going to make it happen, but you have a good chance of making it happen. Much better chance than if you didn't. Okay, well, that's all I have for you this week. I trust you're well, I trust you're of good cheer, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.